Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 24 of Buha's Block. Today, I am pleased to be joined by Eric Pincus, national NBA writer for Bleacher Report and the general manager of the Sports Business Classroom. I read all the comments last week. I talked about potentially doing a salary cap breakdown, and you guys flooded the comments with recommendations for Eric, and I thought could think of no one better to bring on this show. He is both a salary cap expert and very plugged in with the Lakers. So Eric, how are you doing today? And thank you for joining me.
I'm doing well. I mean, your viewers, they know their stuff. They know who to reach out to. So I'm glad you had me on.
They do.
Yeah.
I was thinking later, closer to like the draft, having you on, but this is kind of a weird time in the offseason where there's not much going on outside of public comments and certain things that we'll probably stay off for today's episode. But I wanted to start with you with this. So we know like there are several ways to improve the roster. There's the draft, there's trades, there's free agency. Lakers can make a trade, around draft time. They could also make a trade once free agency starts. They also have the number 17 and number 55 picks in this upcoming draft. They could purchase a pick or make a trade for a pick if they so choose. But I'm more interested in the free agency side and what their options are depending on how certain things play out. And I know we could get into a lot of hypotheticals and a lot of theoreticals here, but looking at the most likely 2 or 3 outcomes, what are the free agency tools that the Lakers are most likely to have at their disposal based on how the offseason could play out?
Their offseason hinges on decisions by 2 different players. One of them you might have heard of, LeBron James, and the other is D'Angelo Russell. There's some very minor ones like Jackson Hayes, Cam Reddish have player options. They're small enough that, really negligible. But the main issue is, are you paying LeBron to stay? So if he leaves, that's a very different path. If we go with just the general assumption that LeBron's sticking around, they're paying him in the neighborhood of $50 million, then really the offseason is going to hinge on D'Lo. And he's owed almost $19 million on a player option. And the buzz, which I don't trust, to be fair, is that he'll opt out and explore free agency or try to get the Lakers to commit to a bigger number or a longer contract. I don't know where that is going, but there's an argument to be made for D'Lo opting out, and there's an argument, on the agent side for him to opt in, where if he can't get more money, he doesn't want to end up in a situation where no one else is paying him, and then the Lakers are like, I think Rob Pelinka, as the GM, has shown, he's willing to move on from players. And so, D'Lo could opt out and find that no one else is paying him the $19 million and then be stuck with, the mid-level, which is roughly $13 million. Not every team spends the mid-level. Fewer teams, I think, this year will spend it. He could be in one of those situations where it's wow, this is a, terrible, terrible decision. So I think the Lakers have to figure out what he's going to do, and I think he has to figure out what he's going to do, and he may not know that until right around the draft when his agent, Aaron Mintz, he's probably already doing this, and even though it's illegal, is talking to other teams about his player. And I'm not picking on Aaron Mintz. That's just sort of how the industry works.
That's how it works. Yeah.
Yes. So if they know that they can get money from Orlando, San Antonio, Toronto, whatever, then he'll opt out, he'll sign money, leave. Lakers have that $18-19 million coming off their books. That changes the equation. But if he's back, they really don't have much. Now, the one tool you have as a team in the range of salary is the taxpayer mid-level exception. And for those who aren't familiar, I'll sort of just give an idea that the higher you spend, the fewer tools you have to use. So if you have cap room, use your cap room. If you are over the cap, you have the non-taxpayer mid-level. It's about 13. As you get higher, which is where the Lakers are, you drop down to the taxpayer mid-level, which is just over 5. And then if you go high enough, you have nothing. You have minimums. You can always sign someone for the minimum. And so the Lakers may be in that position where, really, they have $5 million ish, but do they want to keep Taurean Prince? Do they want to keep Max Christie, his cousin, I guess. Like, are they keeping the 17 pick? Are they making other trades? So can they shed salary? And if you're shedding, are you shedding if you can spend 5, what are you shedding to spend 13? Like, if you just dump somebody, if you trade Rui and get $8 million more to spend, are you getting a player better than Rui would be for this team? So I don't know that there's a clear path yet for the Lakers, but right now it looks like, they may either keep the team as is if everyone opts in and really not have anything to spend because they keep Christie and Prince, or they choose to go somewhere else with just $5 million, which is, it's not great. I'm not going to lie. For Laker fans, like, free agency, straight up, you're basically hoping that the coaching change is the main reason why the team improves. And that may be the case, but are they as good as the Wolves? Are they as good as Denver? Denver's the one team they can't get past. Are they suddenly better than Denver? I don't know.
So let's take a couple steps back and go back to LeBron. So as we've reported at The Athletic and other outlets have reported as well, the Lakers or everything we've heard is that the Lakers are prepared to offer LeBron whatever type of contract he wants. And that, whether he opts in and looks to extend in August, or whether he opts out and looks to re-sign, be it a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, 3 years, like whatever LeBron wants, he is going to have that contract offered to him by the Lakers. Is there an advantage in either direction? I know technically if he opts out and resigns, it's about $2 million less. So maybe that wiggle room, I mean, every dollar counts, right? So maybe that's the preferred outcome for the Lakers. But I guess from LeBron's side and from the Lakers side, which way kind of makes more sense, and which way do you think this ultimately ends up going?
Well, there's a few aspects. Like, for one, we have a new TV deal coming in, and there was some question as far as whether the league would get what it was hoping to get. And it looks like it's getting a lot of money, which is great for business, but it means that the cap, not this coming year, but the year after, should go up about 10%. And I was told by someone in a position of at least some level of authority to just bump all my projections for the foreseeable future to 10% a year. So from a financial perspective for LeBron, opting in, he could re-sign at about 51. I'm sorry. Opting in, he is under a contract for 51. And then his extension would start up to about 54. So we're talking about almost $5 million, not quite $5 million, 4.5, we'll call it, where he'll make $4.5 million more just opting in, adding 2 years. It makes the most sense. Now, if he opts out, he's signing for less, he's giving up a little money. What would he get with that? And I guess the argument would be some level of power in leverage, I guess, in pushing the Lakers to do what he wants to do. Maybe he wants a no trade clause. He can't get a no trade clause in an extension, but he can in a new contract. To me, he just should, for the Lakers, probably rather he opt out, because the max this year is actually lower than his option. And so his max, we'll call it 50. It's just under. Saves the Lakers about $1.5 million in flexibility. So from that point of view, and then over the life of the deal, they would save $4.5 million for the Lakers. Yeah, you probably would rather he opt out. You pay him, give him the no trade clause if he wants, because, like, if you want to trade LeBron, he already has a no trade clause just called LeBron. Like, he's not going to go anywhere else, like, unless he wants to go somewhere else. And I guess, sure, technically the Lakers could trade him, but they didn't trade Kobe. Like, it's just not in their nature how the Lakers operate, right or wrong. There's a reverence to stars that they accommodate, and maybe that helps them get the next star, right? Like, LeBron wanted to come here. Maybe it's because, in part, maybe not, on how they treated Kobe at the end and took care of him back in the day. I don't know. I can't speak for LeBron, but I think from their point of view, that's how they like to operate. And so, yeah, he should opt out from the Lakers' point of view. That will give you no trade clause. We'll save a little money. And it's not Lakers being cheap. It's about flexibility, right? It's like you would rather pay less so you could pay someone else more. I mean, they're not the highest paid team in the league, but they're in the repeater tax. They could have made some moves to get out of the tax. They were very close. They did not. They added. Well, they actually didn't make any moves this year, but over the summer they added and stayed over the tax. And I had people in the industry telling me Lakers are going to duck the tax. Lakers are going to deduct. It's no question. They'll get out of the tax. I'm like, I don't know. That's not the intel I have. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I don't think they will. And then they didn't. So I do get some contingent of the Laker fan base trying to tell me that they're just cheap. And I'm like, no, this is about like they have limited resources based on the rules. If LeBron opts out, they have a tiny bit more flexibility. Maybe that means keeping Max Christie or Prince, whether you love Prince or not, as a bench player who's pretty solid. So yeah, I think I if I'm LeBron, I mean, opting in makes more sense because you get more money. So how important is a no trade clause? He probably just opts in and then extends. But if you're the Lakers, you want him to opt out.
And then a few days before he has to make this decision, the Lakers have the 2024 NBA draft. And that is the first day that they can combine or have access to trading their 3 tradable first round picks that they could use either on draft day or later into the summer. Is there any advantage? We're going to get into the first and second apron stuff, so you could touch on it a little bit now if you want. But is there any advantage to making a trade on draft day, I guess, other than potentially showing LeBron that you're serious about upgrading the roster or bringing in a third star? But like that aside, is there any like financial advantage to making a trade on draft day or before the free agency period starts? Or is it basically the same thing and there's not much of a difference?
Well, so the Lakers right now, this year through June 30th, are hard capped at that first apron. And so by signing Taurean Prince and signing Gabe Vincent using the mid-level, they didn't use the full mid-level, but they used the non-taxpayer mid-level. That's the biggest tool. And then using the biannual, which is a smaller tool, they triggered a hard cap for this year. That's through June 30th. And they are about $3.4 million under that. So any trade they make in that time frame can only add 3.5. So sure, if there's a trade to make that makes sense, go ahead. It's just if Laker fans, they may have visions of stars and like bringing in big money. It's not going to happen until July. Once July kicks, July 1st, that hard cap evaporates. Lakers have a new set of decisions to make. And if they don't use those tools, they don't trigger that hard cap, they could take in more. Now, the rules are punishing because as you take in more, it gets harder and harder. For instance, if you take in more money than you send out, let's say you send out $20 million in salary. And if you take back $20 million and $1, now you have a first apron hard cap. So you're limited to what you can take back. If you combine players, right? So let's say D'Angelo opts in, and you take Rui. I'm just making up names, right? I mean, let's see. That right there is about almost $36 million. So you can aggregate those two together to take back somebody making up to that $36 million, not more. However, by combining them, you trigger a second apron hard cap. So anytime you combine a player to take back more together, second apron hard cap. That second apron projects to be just under 190, so 189.5 roughly, and that first apron is about 179. So I think the Lakers will probably, if they make a trade, function in that first apron above it, but below the second. So they'd probably be in that. Their total payroll will be under 189.5. And so that's just where you plug in, and fans like to run trade concepts by me or play with the numbers, and that's fine. I mean, I enjoy that. Just there's a lot to think about. Like you have to get the roster back to, if you're triggering a hard cap, which everyone on Twitter seems to associate with me, you have to get back to 14. So you have to go to 14 players. So it's like, hey, I made a trade. Lakers have, they get this thing, and then they're like, well, that's 9 players, and they're right at the hard cap. You got to flesh it out to 14. So yeah, I think that there's some flexibility, and there is a path to getting money back, but it's delicate and it has to be done very diligently and per the rules. They don't want teams to just add salary past a certain line. It's about parity. It's about financial parity. It's about other complex rules like making sure the players get their fair share of the BRI, which is about 50%. 10 billion comes in, the players are going to get 5 billion. Making sure the heavy spenders don't overspend keeps the system working. And so these rules are not just to punish. And although I think Warriors fans and some other teams might disagree, it's really about keeping it level. And the Lakers, I think, will consistently treat that second apron over the life of the CBA, which is another 6 seasons. I think they'll treat it as a hard cap. I don't think they'll cross that line at any point. That's my opinion. It's pretty well sourced, but at the same time, people may say something and do something different. So if you're a Laker fan, just find out what the second apron is. Figure that's your team's max budget. And I think if you start projecting within that, you'll be all right.
So how does it work in terms of, let's go back to draft day. And I know you said it's more likely that they make a move in July than on draft day. But if they aggregate the salaries of, and this is all theoretical for those listening and looking to aggregate, but let's just say it was something like Rui, Austin, and Gabe. And that's about $38.5 million or so, give or take a few $100,000 based on their current salaries before the new fiscal year kicks in. So based on what you had just said, they could take back about $3.5 million, or they had to stay under that. So they could take back, in theoretically, something like $42 million in salary, which I believe Trae Young and Donovan Mitchell, 2 names that have been linked to them, are both in that ballpark. Trae might be a little higher. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I guess in that instance, like, how does it work with actual like roster spots, where if the Lakers are trading 3 guys out on draft day, hypothetically, and they're getting back 1, how does that affect it? Like does that work with the other team, or would they have to also be sending out kind of equal number of players, or making sure that they're at a certain threshold? Like how does it work when we're out of the season? So technically, it, might not apply the same way that it does previously, or maybe it does.
Well, so we're already in the new rules. So if they sent out 38, let's say those 3 players combined to be exactly 38, the most they can bring back is 38. So they can't go above. So there's the padding ended for first apron, above first apron teams. So let's think about this. So they're not over the first apron, so they're not restricted.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, because they're not restricted, they can't go over the first apron no matter what. So they can take back 38 million plus the 3.5. Now, D'Angelo has a 700. If D'Angelo was in there, if he opts in and he was traded, he has a 700,000 unlikely incentive that counts. So it would bump it up slightly. So let's call it 3.5 to 4. So yes, they can pad. The rule is in, but since they can't, so yeah, they could trade those 3 players plus up to $4 million roster space. You can go up to 21 during the offseason. So right now they're at technically 18 because of the 2-ways, right? You have 15 players, you have 3 2-ways, and you could always also waive the 2-ways anyway. So like if you weren't there, if it was if it was this season, you wouldn't have to do that. They're free agents in July. So guys like Castleton, Giles, and Mays just come right off. But it's if they're sending out 3 guys, I mean, how many are they taking back anyway, right? So it's really more the issue for the other team. Like if it was whatever, Donovan Mitchell or something like that, you would have to look at Cleveland and say, at most they have 18 as well. So if they're taking in 3 for 1, they'd be at 20. So they're still good too. So I don't think it'll be an issue in terms of roster space. During the regular season, it's very important. Can't go more than 15. And that's something that people get confused about because they like, well, you could just waive the guys once they come in. It's like, no, you actually have to get the space before you acquire them, then waive them. So you have to waive your own guys or trade other guys. So there are some complications. I don't think roster space will be the issue. But yeah, the Lakers can add a little bit now. I would think for flexibility purposes, like I don't know the reason to do it in June when the Lakers have a little more flexibility in July. And a lot of trades are increasingly becoming multi-team just based on the complications of the rules. It gets harder and harder to make deals. It is easier in some ways, but maybe, if it was Donovan Mitchell, whatever, maybe they don't want one of the players in that name and that list. And so they, there's, I don't know, the Hornets or something get Gabe Vincent or something. I'm just making up stuff. But like theoretically, you have the teams that need cap room to facilitate a deal might be more willing to participate in July or more able to participate. All that said is that your team, you make the deal. The Lakers can't make a deal with their first round pick till after the draft. Once that draft, so they've selected number 17, they would basically have prearranged a deal. So they would say, okay, whatever, fantasy Cleveland in our scenario, we're taking whoever you tell us at 17 to execute this deal. Usually there's going to be like a on-air broadcast, like a Shams of The Athletic will say this pick is being taken by the Lakers for the Cavs, and this is part of a trade that will happen after the draft. And that's how it would sort of, it's not official, it's not a real trade, it's not binding, but teams generally follow through on it, barring a player having a failing a physical. You're pretty much going to execute these trades. So, and then after the draft, the Lakers can trade 2031 as well. So you can't trade 2031 today. You can't trade 2031 the day of the draft before the draft. But after they use their pick, you can now trade in the next 7 years of drafts. So they could trade 29, 2031, and 17, which is their 3 first-round picks that they could trade. So, and then getting out of 17 would at least open up a little more flexibility in the next year in terms of money, getting that money. It's not crazy money. It's about just under 4 million, 3.8. So that's an approximate. So yeah, they have flexibility. I don't know that there's a compelling advantage. If there's a reason to do it before the draft, or rather before July, after the draft, you probably do. I mean, if there's no reason not to, you do it. But we're seeing most draft day trades tend to bleed over just a little bit. And I'll just throw in that the Lakers have, what in terms of cash, for 23-24 this season, they still have money that they haven't made any trades this year, so they can still send out $7 million. So they do have the ability to buy like a pick for Bronny or something if they need to move up.
It could happen.
Yeah, they have $7 million to spend, and then once the year rolls over, that jumps up a little bit. So they have about 14 million combined, a little bit over, like 14.3 in this year's money and next year's money. So maybe you execute a smaller trade just to use the cash to buy a pick or who knows, something else, dump a player, whatever. And then July, you have another 7.3. The thing is that teams like to save that money in July for the next draft so that they can buy a pick the next year. And the Lakers don't have a first next year, probably. We're also assuming that the Pelicans don't defer their pick, which is everything I've heard. But, it's
a current assumption.
I think we have another couple weeks. I think it's around the beginning of June. I don't know the exact date, but it's somewhere around June 1st or so. They have to decide at some point. So that's our
So I guess that brings up an interesting follow-up then. If the Pelicans don't defer to 2025 and they take the Lakers 2024 pick, how would that impact? I mean, I guess the Lakers then can't trade 3 picks, or they still can.
No, they still can, because they owe 27 to Utah. And so that restricts 20. There's the Stepien rule, which means you have to have a first in every other future draft. So once you take a player in 2024 in June, that player is no longer a draft pick. They are the rights to a player. So we are now looking at the next 7 drafts, and you can trade the rights to the player you just drafted. That's why you can't trade the player before the draft, because it's rights. No, it's not right. It's a pick. Whereas once you draft them, 2 seconds later, you can trade them because it's not a pick anymore. And it opens up the next 7 years. So 2025, we're assuming 24 goes to New Orleans. 25 is available. 26 isn't because you traded 25 and 27. 28 won't be available because you traded 27, but that opens up 29. You can trade 29, but you can't trade 30. You can trade 31. So those are the 3 picks. It's either the rights to 24 after they're made, or if the Pelicans have that, 25, 29, 31. So Lakers have the 3 firsts. Whether they should trade 3 firsts, like, I don't know, we could debate that. Depends on who you're getting back.
Yeah.
I don't know. From a point of view, the lifespan of this particular LeBron-led team, given his age, is probably short, and trading picks is that's more of a long-term commitment, but teams go for it and put it all on the table to win now. Fine. Wolves did that. Everyone looked at them and said they were crazy, including myself, in terms of what they gave up. And yet here they are in a position to potentially win now. And to be fair, the Nuggets did the same to build their roster. They traded every first that they could. They went all in on Aaron Gordon, and in addition to all the other moves they had made, and it worked for them. So it's just you better be confident, or you better feel like you have no choice, I guess, which isn't usually a great motivator, but that feels closer to the reality versus if they could get a Donovan Mitchell or a star player, we can certainly argue it. And maybe that's the star that carries them beyond LeBron. So it's just, if you don't get the right player now, it's going to be a little difficult as LeBron starts to age out, which, I don't know, maybe he's got 3 years left, kills it, still one of the best players of all time. Or maybe starts to age out more rapidly, which, tends to happen. Kobe went from he was killing it in his final season before he tore his Achilles. I mean, he was carrying the team and playing crazy minutes and doing crazy, crazy things at his age, and then just boom, fell off a cliff, unfortunately, with the Achilles, and was never the same after that. So I'm pulling for health. That's like the only thing I root for. Really, I can't root for teams, and I root for people, and I root for health. So hopefully LeBron, and not rooting for the Lakers, just I root for every team. Just stay healthy. Let's see the best competition on the floor. So maybe the Lakers have 3 years of elite competition ahead of them. So we'll have to wait and see.
So let's say LeBron makes his decision, whether it's opting in or extending. For our purposes, let's just say opts in, and then plans on, it's August 18th is the first date, I believe, that he could extend. But let's say LeBron opts in, or even if he opts out, plans to resign. So like the Lakers know LeBron is on the books, whether it's for that 49 or that 51. Then they don't make a trade on draft night, and they're retaining those 3 picks to potentially make a move over the offseason. Then it goes to D'Lo. That, as you mentioned earlier,
right?
He's sort of the pivot point of the offseason. So correct me if I'm wrong with any of these hypotheticals, but if D'Lo opts in, he's making 18.7, and that potentially squeezes the Lakers in terms of what they can do with Max Christie. And it ultimately depends on his figure. Also potentially squeezes them with what they could do with Taurean Prince. And again, we're dealing with some hypotheticals here. If he opts out, then the Lakers either, he potentially walks, and the Lakers can then really only replace him using that non-taxpayer MLE, but then they hard cap themselves at about 176.7 million. Or they use the lesser taxpayer MLE, and then that's about, as you said, about a little over 5. Or they could sign and trade him, but then that team that is acquiring D'Lo hard caps themselves. Those are kind of like the 3 general ways that this could play out?
I mean, roughly, yeah. Like the Lakers would be hard capped at the second apron if they sign and trade D'Lo out. But as I noted, like I view that as the Lakers spending limit anyway, so there wouldn't be prohibitive. So and I think there's a point to mention that some people get confused on, people new to the salary cap. LeBron, unsigned, opted out, has what's called a cap hold, which is basically a fee on their books for his rights. The right to pay him his salary will take up a max slot. So LeBron takes up unsigned 50-ish million, whatever the max is, 49, whatever for him. That's how much he takes up on their books. So it's not like they could opt out. LeBron opts out, D'Lo opts out. They can go spend money, and then these guys, re-sign. It doesn't work that way. So that some people, even in positions of power, like former players, will say that kind of stuff, and I'm like, it's just not the rules. Please set up a meeting. Let's have a conversation. I'll tutor you. I'm happy to tutor. I work with a lot of former players. So yeah, you've got LeBron and AD, D'Lo, Rui, Austin, Gabe, Vanderbilt, Hood, Schifino, Wood opted in already. Assuming Hayes opts in, Reddish opts in. Again, minor difference if they don't. Maxwell Lewis, number 17, number 55, assuming they pay them the minimum. And then Taurean Prince, the most they can pay Prince, because he has non-bird rights, he's been with the team for 1 year, is 120% of what he earned last year. So the most they can pay him is 5.4. So let's say that all that happens. Everyone opts in, including LeBron. They don't make any trades. They retain the exact same roster. And I have not mentioned Max Christie, I don't believe, right? So I left out Max Christie.
Yeah.
You are at 189.2-ish.
So you're right there, right?
Yeah, so they are over the first apron, obviously. They have not spent the mid-level, the taxpayer version. They're about 400,000 underneath with 15 players. So if D'Lo opts in and they don't trade anybody, it's a choice arguably between Prince, Christie, or spending it on some other player via the taxpayer mid-level, which is around the same price. Slightly less than Prince, but in the ballpark of what the most you can pay Prince is. So the Lakers obviously want to improve. Can you get at 17 a center to play against Jokic, and maybe there's Khalil Ware or Eddie, or I don't know, Zach Eddie, is that it? Or like, so there's some big dudes. Edie, Eddie. I'm probably
not a big
saying
college
that.
basketball guy, but yeah,
right.
polishing
pronunciations. I watch zero. I wish I could watch more. I watch a tiny bit of the tournament. I have a bunch of scouts that work for me in sports business classroom that help me build out a draft board. So our draft board last year was like really, like we did really well in terms of predicting what was going to happen within a range. And I don't even know. I didn't know who the players were in terms of like eyesight, or pronunciation, but like I could tell you what they can do, what they can't.
The value.
But the kid is like 7. Like I was at the combine just last week, and we're around. We've been fortunate, we're around players all the time, and you get, I don't think jaded is the right word, but you just get accustomed to someone being 6'10" and being like, okay, it's not. They're tall, but they're not like, we're just used to. Like AD is like AD's height, and a lot of guys are about AD's height, but then you get someone who's like, okay, 7'3", like Boban height, and you start to go, okay, that guy's tall. So that's where Eddie, whatever you pronounce it. I'm probably butchering it, but I stood next to him and I'm like, okay, this guy is like, that's like tall. I'm like, okay, this kid is so, but sometimes that's good. Sometimes tall doesn't necessarily mean that you're the right fit anyway. And we see in the NBA that like, if you're too tall, sometimes you're not mobile enough, and or you don't have the body, the heft, but he does have a little body to him. So anyway, I don't know that any of these are the answers to, like going to the conference finals or trying to get back to the conference finals and higher, trusting a rookie. And you say, well, Mavs are, right? They got Derek Lively out there. And so Ben Shepherd,
he was
even though
huge in game 6.
Yeah.
Lively.
So there are young players with a good coach who can work that player in over time and develop them and build their confidence and find a way to augment their flaws, hide their flaws, because all players are flawed. There are no unflawed players, but usually just inexperience. That's you may have all the talent in the world, but experience matters. So I view the Lakers as sort of stuck without a trade as who they are, and that's already losing either Christie, Prince, or just returning 100% as you were and hoping that you draft, maybe I assume they would need a big man because every other position would seem filled if they return the same roster. I mean, unless, we haven't mentioned Spencer Dinwiddie. Like these are afterthoughts at this point, just in terms of roster space. 55, we could plug in Bronny unless they trade up to find another way to get Bronny if 55 is too low. And theoretically, they could put him on a two-way if they needed the roster spot and then draft or sign another minimum guy. And if they did, that's problematic because if we do get minimum, a 2-year min, that puts them. Oops, I did that wrong. Hold on 1 second. I did max. I have all the tools right here. I know this is, if you're a video listener, it might be interesting, but if you're an audio listener, it's absolutely stunning content right there. But there we go. I punched it in. So they are a little bit. Yeah, there it is. They are over by 1.3. So they sort of need to use that.
This is if you're saying that they're over if they this is for the 55 pick.
Yeah, let's say you draft Bronny at 55, you put him on as a two-way, and you just sign a vet min guy. There's no trades. Everyone's back. You pay Prince the most you can pay him. You can't even put a vet min in that 15th spot and put Bronny on a two-way and be under that apron. So now the good news is that the second apron, that is. Now they're not hard capped at that second apron, but I think it's safe to say that the Lakers are treating that like a hard cap because just by being over that amount, you're putting yourself in jeopardy, right? Like as it is, I think they are technically over as it is anyway, right? Like, yeah, like they're over anyway with Prince at 5'4", so they're over by 400. Yeah, they actually are over by 400. I said under earlier, they're over. So like there are some minor tweaks that they have where like the punishments of being over the second apron means that like your draft pick down the road is frozen and you like it drops to the bottom of the first round. Like there's all these restrictions that I just don't think the Lakers will touch, especially to like, no, you just take someone at 55, you put Bronny on and on the spot and you don't get a vet. So just thinking it through, their flexibility is limited. Now, D'Angelo opts out, changes the equation significantly because you're just immediately dropping off $19 million. And so they could be under the first apron if they chose to be, but that gives them about $7.5 million to spend, about $8 million to spend. If D'Angelo's off, right, 8.2. They just need to fill in with whatever. Like you're keeping Prince, you could pay the mid-level of about 5, or you could pay Christie. So it's still not like this crazy amount of money. Or you could let Prince go and spend like, let's say you spend $13 million on the non-tax. I'm estimating. You're at about 7. This is the full mid-level, the big one. You're at about 178 rather. You're about 600 below. So yeah, like they could. It's kind of like if D'Angelo goes, you have to replace not just D'Angelo, but Prince with $13 million. So it's not. You're basically replacing. If Prince was their sixth man, you're replacing your 2 of your top 6 with one player at $13 million. It's not a great scenario. So, I
guess so. You could say like if Vando healthy, and you keep Max, like maybe Max can step into a larger role. But yeah, I mean, regardless, you are losing some of your depth and replacing it with most likely a less, because you could probably find a better player than Prince for that 13, but then now you don't have a D'Lo replacement, right? So it gets a little tricky.
So like basketball it's not that complicated. As it is complicated in some aspects, but like the basics of basketball, even at like the youth level, is like you need some players who can dribble the basketball and create offense. And there are teams like the Celtics and the Clippers that maybe have forwards that do it. And obviously the Celtics have Drew now, but like they've gone to the conference finals or whatever with like Marcus Smart, who's not really a true creator. And the Clippers, they went without a real point guard. So it's doable, but like it's really rare. At some point, you need somebody to initiate. You obviously need some big guys. You need some size, right? You got AD for that. I still think they don't have enough size, but you need somebody to bring the ball up, to create offense. And if LeBron is healthy for 82-ish games or 75 games, like how much do you want it to be his responsibility? How much are you going to give to Austin Reeves to have that responsibility? And can Gabe Vincent do enough? Is he a starter? I think personally, he's probably a 6th, 7th man. He's probably your reserve point guard. But theoretically, is Gabe, Austin, and LeBron enough creation? I would say probably not. And so D'Lo, while he's flawed, and as all players are, he is like a 6 assist, 7 assist, 5 assist guy, give or take. Like he's a creator. He can create. LeBron misses a game, and they go to dual creators of like D'Lo and Austin, and they did really well last year, right? Like they won a decent chunk of games without LeBron, including a game where there was no Bron and AD in Boston, where it was just like let those guys create. So if you have to replace D'Angelo, you really need to replace him with, in my opinion, with like a higher tier creator. And you could say, we're not talking like the big Donovan Mitchell like swipe. I'm saying like they don't have a big trade. And if you start looking at like, okay, fine, you let D'Lo go, he opts out, and you need to replace him, and you've got $13 million, right? So who are you going to go after? And I have a list right here of like the top ball handling guards.
It gets pretty grim. Let's hear it.
Oh, it's grim. It's grim. This is not a good free agent year. So Tyrese Maxey and Emmanuel Quickley are number 1 out of the Lakers price range. Number 2, they're restricted, so they have no means to go get them. And so they're most likely returning to their respective teams. And then James Harden is 34 and isn't coming for $13 million. We could debate whether he should or shouldn't. I'm sure some Laker fans right now would say I wouldn't want him at any dollar, and then some would say, yeah, what the hell? I mean, might as well. Like at this point,
13 is pretty.
It's below his market.
Yeah.
So the next best player, the only one I could think of that at least you can argue, is Tyus Jones, who is functionally lighter and smaller than D'Angelo Russell, right? D'Angelo used to be 6'5", then he was 6'4". He's actually 6'3" this year. So he's been shrinking. I think that's more of a measurement issue. He does have some length, doesn't have a ton of speed. Tyus Jones is very quick, but he's also not like this hyper super fast twitch athlete who's gonna, and he's a good shooter. D'Lo's a good shooter. You're basically swapping in D'Lo for someone who can't defend any better than D'Lo, right? Like Austin Reeves destroyed Tyus Jones in that Memphis Grizzlies series. So then it's like, D'Anthony Melton, Spencer Dinwiddie, they already have, right, on some level. Markelle Fultz, Kyle Lowry, who's, near the end of his time. I mean, at least you can argue like he was playing in the playoffs.
Melton is an interesting one, although it's a completely different player archetype where now you're basically doubling up with like the 3-and-D guards with
you're basically getting Gabe Vincent.
Yeah.
And also, just like Gabe missed most of the season, so did D'Anthony Melton. So like is a D'Angelo replacement in D'Anthony Melton doubling down on the guy you already have the answer? I would say no. He might be available simply because the Sixers might be big game hunting, and he just may be a casualty of their spending, and they may not have the room for him. So like, yeah. And then like Lowry, at least like I can argue, like if they can get Lowry as an additional guard, I mean, sure. Like if let's say they got Donovan Mitchell and they didn't trade Austin, but they traded, among other players, they traded D'Angelo. He opts in and they trade him. And you could also get Kyle Lowry. Sure. Like I think he'll stay in Philadelphia, but like, yeah, I mean, immediately, like you have somebody who in a key moment in a playoff series might be able to help you win that series. Like Mike Conley's out there doing it, right? So there's no reason to say that like Kyle Lowry, if you don't give him like minutes, like if you manage his minutes throughout the season and he's like an extra player. But yeah, like that's it. Like, it gets real quick down to like Campaign and DeLon Wright and, good, like there's some good players out there. These are not bad players, but they're not, D'Angelo is probably better than almost everyone on this list. outside of, like the maxis of it. And we could debate where he is. Is he better than Melton? Not defensively, but and Melton has shot okay in his career, but like he also was hurt most of last year. And then there's a couple other players with decisions. Let's see, at the ball handling guard, like D'Angelo, but nothing to speak of. Chris Paul will probably be a free agent. There's a reasonable chance he gets traded by or just cut by the Warriors. And LeBron and him are obviously have a strong relationship. There's a universe where the Lakers sign Chris Paul. I don't think it's outrageous.
They
won't have
previously
much
had
money.
interest in him last summer.
Yeah, I think it's
Before, yeah.
I don't. The main issue is he always seems to be hurt in the playoffs. I mean, even when he was younger, he's 39 almost by the time of next season. He's 38 right now. He'll be about 39 at some point during next season. So again, Kyle Lowry, they could help you in key moments. Chris has always been hurt. And of course, Westbrook might be a free agent, which I don't think
Don't throw that out there.
Yeah. That's about it. Those are so like I would be remiss without mentioning Chris Paul as a real possibility. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. Is like, let's say D'Angelo's gone, you're just spending I don't know. Was Chris coming for the minimum? I don't know. Like the San Antonio Spurs need a point guard. You need like a pro around Victor Wembanyama, and you have money, and maybe you give him like 10 million or 15 million just to be there. Very reasonably possible. So I don't want to say that he just comes cheap to the Lakers, but it's in the absence of a better offer, I could see that. Something like that.
You just hit on something that I actually wanted to ask you quickly was, so if D'Lo opts in, he could be traded once free agency starts, correct?
No, he could be traded immediately.
He could be traded immediately. Okay.
If he opted in today, he could be traded today.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I was just curious. Like, I guess that would be, I would assume the Lakers' preference of if they are trying to get a third star, I think the ideal path would be D'Lo opting in, you using that salary, and then because theoretically this player would be basically your D'Lo replacement. I don't see them trying to build a backcourt around like Donovan Mitchell and D'Lo or Trae Young and D'Lo, and then potentially you could keep Austin if again, depending on what the other team wants.
Right. I mean, it obviously you have negotiable items. Who is available? What kind of leverage? Like, if Trae Young were available, name me more than 2 teams that might go after him, and I'm not even 100% sure the Lakers want him. You know what I mean? It's like he left clutch. He does not. There are like, is he better than D'Lo at some things? Absolutely. Is he a better defender than D'Lo? Like, I mean, I don't know.
No.
I would argue D'Lo's a better defender, and that's not saying much, right? D'Lo's not a great defender. Trae is not a defender. Trae doesn't do anything without the ball. His reputation is as such that he's not necessarily loved by his teammates. Like, that's the buzz. And I don't like to say negative things, but like, it's pretty overwhelming. I guess the intel on Trae is that his teammates don't enjoy playing with him. But I still could see the Lakers doing it just because like he's a name and whatever.
I mean, I think the offensive gap between those two is notable in my opinion.
Right. Like, yeah, I mean, Trae can create. I don't think he does anything off the ball except sulk. But
it would be a big adjustment of like getting him to buy in as like you're the number 3 guy
at all to anything in Atlanta. Like, is what I was told, that like they brought in DeJounte, and basically if DeJounte had the ball, Trae just sulked and stood in the corner on the wing and didn't move without the ball, didn't set any screens, didn't do anything, and they couldn't get him to do anything beyond that. Now, maybe that's sour grapes and overstatement, and maybe it's situational, and he goes to a new place and has a completely revamped attitude. And we have seen, rarely, but we have seen some players in a new home seem very different. But usually what they say is like, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. So, but like, I think, so like, there's really like the drama of the Lakers. There's a lot of focus on LeBron and what he does, focus on Bronny, but like, it's really all about D'Angelo. Like, that's really the crux of the offseason for the Lakers. And like, from a point of view, he needs the Lakers unless someone else needs him, right? Like, so if I look at the teams with cap room, like the Pistons have a ton of money. They need to spend it. We don't know who their GM is going to be. He's maybe their best hope. I don't know why they would go after him, but like theoretically they have the money. The other is Orlando, where I could at least argue that they definitely need shooting. It's a team of scrappy defenders that need shooting. He's a step back defensively, but at the same time, maybe they feel like it's worthwhile because of his shooting. He's not exactly the age bracket of everybody else. But I also think like they're looking at Clay. They might look at Paul George. I don't know if they will or won't, but like they have real money. And then the Spurs have some money. I don't think he's a pop type. D'Angelo Russell
doesn't scream a San Antonio.
The intel I have is that San Antonio's probably not where he's going to end up, but at the same time, we don't know. Toronto had the opportunity to get him last year, didn't want him.
Yeah,
like they took Dinwiddie and paid Dinwiddie to go away, and they had the opportunity to get D'Lo instead, didn't want him. That doesn't mean they don't. So they have some money. The Jazz, I hear, they're spending most of their money on marketing to keep him. Philadelphia is going bigger game hunting, and they have Maxey. I don't see D'Angelo as like the guy they would go after. Oklahoma City Thunder, I don't see that. That doesn't really make any sense to me. Shoot, and then Charlotte is rebuilding. So like one of those teams,
like it doesn't really make sense.
One of those teams for D'Angelo, you're his agent. One of those teams has to pony up money. If they don't, now you need the Lakers, because otherwise you're looking at maybe a mid-level of like 13 or a sign-in trade, which you need the Lakers. So I'm saying you need the Lakers, be it sign-in trade, or you need the Lakers if it's opt-in and trade. That's where Aaron Mintz has to do his job and try to find a team. If he can, so be it. He leaves. The Lakers have a little more flexibility in terms of keeping Christie, Prince, or using their mid-level. But again, it's not a great situation. But if he opts in, the advantage for him opting in is maybe like the Nets stand out to me as the one team that probably needs him the most. That's assuming they don't get some other point guard via trade or Donovan Mitchell or themselves, someone they potentially could get. But he did play there and had an all-star year left. And obviously when you leave, sometimes negative things are said at the time, but like hell, D'Angelo left the Lakers and there were negative things said at that time, and he came back here. So they need a point guard. Dennis Schroeder is their point guard. I would say that D'Angelo is a better shooter, better creator. And if you have the both of them, it's not a bad combination. Obviously the Lakers hit a
you probably need a team meeting early on that.
Yeah, they need to sort out a few,
Yeah.
But like the Lakers did get to the conference finals with that combination of guard, right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, D'Lo struggled against Denver, but so did everybody that year, right? So if he opted in, let's say that he opted in, got traded to the Nets. He's not extension eligible because he's on a 2-year deal, but they would have his rights. And so that next offseason, they can give him as much as they need to, just have to exceed whatever other offers are. So maybe if the Lakers aren't like, oh, we're done with D'Lo, we don't want to reinvest in him long term, he needs to get to a place that will. So be it sign and trade, be it opt in and trade, same thing. The Lakers need D'Lo. D'Lo needs the Lakers, unless one of those teams I mentioned goes after him. And I'll just caveat to say that like when the Knicks went and got Jalen Brunson, they didn't have cap room. So it's always possible that some other team uses those teams with cap room to trade to become a team with cap room. Is a team doing all that like for D'Angelo Russell? I don't think so. Like, I don't think there's any team in the NBA that's like, we're going to go figure out how to get cap room to get D'Lo, like Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson was clearly like on the rise, and not to say D'Lo is not a very good player, but it's just a different situation. So, but I think that's really what is the focus here. Like, what happens with D'Lo, and if he opts in now, let's say they trade Rui and D'Lo. Right off the bat, you're at 36, almost 35-7, which is, most of the way there to almost any player. I mean, there's a few players making in the 50s, but like, or in the high 40s, but you're getting there. And if you include a Gabe Vincent or a Jared Vanderbilt, at some point there's a diminishing return where the team is getting too thin. But you could certainly include a Jalen Hood-Schifino, a Christian Wood. Like, you start adding. Now there's a limit to how many minimum guys you can add, but if you did like Hood-Schifino and Wood, that's about 7, we'll call it. You add that to D'Lo and Rui, you're pretty much at almost any player. And that team needs roster space, but equally they don't need roster space. As long as they get to 21, they can just cut Wood and not bring him or trade him to someone else. So you don't worry about it in the offseason. It's why building your team in the offseason is usually a better idea, because you have more flexibility. And then they could trade also their first, which isn't matching salary, but it takes money off their books. So, and the question of like, well, how would they flesh out their roster if you're taking in like a really expensive player? The answer usually is probably at that point just minimum. Like, if you're sending out all these guys, you're probably going like LeBron, AD, and call it Donovan Mitchell. They would probably aspire to keep at that point Austin and Gabe, so that you have like a 3-guard front of Gabe, Austin, and Donovan. And you're basically out a Rui and hoping that Vanderbilt can do that role, and then going with whatever minimum players you can to augment the center position. And I guess maybe, on the wing, or maybe a Spencer Dinwiddie type or something like that. But that's, it depends on what star's coming back. Obviously, if it's Trae, that's a very different thing. Donovan is a bigger guard. He's not tall, but he's certainly bigger than Trae. And you could run Austin and Donovan, and boy, that's like like when it comes to big time playmaking shots, like playoff attackers, you could argue it's a lot to deal with if you've got to deal with Donovan, Austin, and LeBron and AD offensively. From a point of view of that, you can argue that team has so much attacking power that if you put good coaching and the right defensive long athletes and some thicker, bigger players to just try to bother Jokic, whether you get past them or not, somebody who could maybe try to guard Michael Porter Jr., but again, on the minimum, it's not easy to do. So, maybe there's a cheap guy that they could trade for along the way too. So, Laker fans, if you're despondent after being out, there's always hope. You just have to trust their front office to make good decisions, which, same front office that traded for Russell Westbrook, but also the same front office that did pretty well getting out of Westbrook and got back to the conference finals. So I can't tell you whether to trust the front office or not, because it depends on the year. They're not always consistently good, but sometimes they're good, but sometimes they're really bad. So we'll see what they are this summer.
One hypothetical follow-up on sign and trading D'Lo. So you mentioned Brooklyn. Let's say Brooklyn has interest in him and they want to do I guess if he opts in, you can just trade him. But I guess I was thinking more along the lines of like a sign and trade, but that probably doesn't work with Brooklyn not having much cap space, right? Or
well, you'd be surprised. So they have for Dinwiddie a $20.4 million trade exception, and that's available to them because they weren't in the aprons and such. So D'Lo could go to them at 20.4. Now, what's the raise? It shouldn't be fine. Yeah, that's plenty. That's if he's getting more than 20%. So let's see if there's any sort of, but without doing the exact number, it's definitely in the range for a D'Lo sign and trade. He may want more than 20, but like if he's got more than 20, then it's going to be one of those teams with cap room. So we're going on the assumption that doesn't exist. He needs a sign and trade. And that's like no problem for the Nets. They could just take him in. They don't even have to send a single human back, right? Like that would just give the Lakers a trade exception for D'Lo's money, which they could then use as an $18 million or whatever trade exception. It would be, exactly his salary. So they could use it as a tool to trade later, or you could do 3 ways. So like again, we'll just go to Donovan Mitchell because that, I don't even know that the Cavs are trading him. He may extend there. But let's say tomorrow, by the time you air this, Jovan, he's demanded a trade, and he only has 3 or 4 teams, and the Lakers are on that list. Let's say that happens. Then you could trade as a multi-team sign and it's tricky because if you're using the 17 pick, you have to be careful because you can't pick for the Cavs and then do a sign-in trade with D'Lo because like you would have had to pre-negotiate with D'Lo, and you can't negotiate with D'Lo till July, the sign-in trade, but you're making the pick in June. It's doable, but you'll be investigated a little bit. And so they would just have to really say like, yeah, we have this trade worked out with the Cavs. This is what we intend to execute upon making this pick. Like you would have to do your own internal paperwork to show like these are, like have a paper trail to show what your intent is so that when you get investigated by the NBA, that you can show that no, we later, when we were going to execute the trade, we had already figured out in July, we had the opportunity to sign and trade D'Lo. So we combine these two concepts together. Then the NBA is like, fine, as long as you have like, because several years ago, like Bogdanovich went from Sacramento to Milwaukee in a sign and trade around the draft, and it leaked. And the NBA was like, wait, that's not legal. And then they basically investigated them, docked a second, and scuttled they basically said that's never going to happen. That is outlawed. You cannot make that move. And he ended up going to Atlanta just as a restricted free agent. They didn't match his offer sheet. Point being is that there's precedence of the league stepping in. So they just need to be diligent and with eyes wide open. I can argue it's very doable that they could sign and trade D'Lo as part, 3-team trade, D'Lo to Brooklyn, Donovan to LA. The challenge there is what do you get in Cleveland? And they would want players that can help them win. So you would have to hope they love Rui, and they would probably want Austin as far as like a player to help them. So,
now you're decimating. I mean, that's 3/5 of your starting lineup.
Right. So and how do you replace them becomes like, well, maybe there's some, I guess if you're trading enough salary, maybe you could get someone back somewhere. But if you got a trade exception for D'Lo, and let's say it was like Austin and Rui and filler or whatever for Donovan, and then you had an $18 million trade exception or whatever for D'Angelo, 18.7, you could then use that. But then, you have a second apron hard cap. So whatever the answer is, because you're aggregating to get Donovan, and again, doesn't matter because I don't think Lakers are going over the 180, call it 190, a little bit less than 190. They're not going over that anyway. So whatever we're saying here, if you did all that, just make sure you cap their payroll at just under 190 because, they'll pay tax. The first apron is restricting, but it's not long-term punitive. They'll stay in that range if it's appropriate, but they're not going to go above that. They're not, at least that's my intel. And I think that's probably how most teams are going to operate outside of the handful that are like the Suns and maybe the Wolves, who probably would if they could, but can't because they're too good and are overinvested in a product that may actually win. So makes sense. But most teams don't have that. So there are a few teams like the Suns. The Clippers might just, but they haven't paid Paul George yet. So even they may be hesitant to stay in that upper level too. Warriors sound like they want to get under the tax. So even they may be getting out of this. So if you think the Lakers are cheap because they don't want to go into the second apron, that's just not the NBA world. It's like, it makes no sense to be at that level. You basically have to figure out how to function below that. Maybe one year you could spike because like the Wolves are like right there, and it's like you can't break this group up because it makes no sense to break it up because if they win a title, who knows if they do or don't, but in a couple weeks or a month or whatever, they win a title, you're fine. We'll do the second apron for a year and see if we can win again. But that's not where the Lakers are, and it also doesn't get them appreciably better because you don't really have tools anyway at that level. It just means you're just getting minimum guys. So how does that help? If the Lakers were there, sure, but they're not there. So this is not a Lakers are cheap thing. This is just this is the NBA landscape, and they have to work within the rules.
So last one, unless there's anything else we haven't really touched on that you could think of, would be the minimum guys. So I think you alluded to it earlier, but there's empty roster charges once you're under, is it 13 or 14 players?
Well, so there's two different I guess placeholders that we use. So there's figuring out when a team is below the cap. Not really an issue for the Lakers. If you're below 13, excuse me, you have to account for a roster charge of about 1.1. That's a rookie minimum. It's not really relevant for the Lakers this year. It's relevant for the Sixers, right? Like you say, well, if they just get down to just Joel Embiid and the rights to Maxey, you just take those two numbers. It's not like they have the cap room minus those two players. You plug in 10 players at 1.1. So they have about 12 roughly million less than that. That's assuming they got rid of Reed and every other human that they have and their first, and, et cetera. But that's not really relevant to the Lakers. What is relevant is that you do have to field a team of 14 players. The Warriors started last year at 13, but you have 2 weeks within the rules to get to 14. And they literally, to save tax, waited until whatever the last day and then signed, is it Gui Santos? I don't know how to say his first name. They signed him. He was a draft pick that they had made, I guess, the year ago, and he had played with their G League team. They waited. The point being is that you do have a slight flexibility. Bottom line, you got to get to 14. So what is the cheapest? The cheapest is that rookie minimum at 1.1 or almost 1.2, which would be their number 55 pick. So it makes sense if they need extra flexibility to use that last roster spot on that. They have the rights to, they don't have the rights to any real active players, prospects. A couple of guys on their books, Chinemalu Elanu and Louis LeBay. Boy, I'm going to butcher that. I don't know French. Louis LeBay. I'm losing my voice too. Excuse me. So they don't really have any active players that are like that they'll be able to sign like Santos was. So basically, if they're at 12, let's say they make a trade where they get out of like D'Lo, Vincent, and whatever. No, D'Lo, Rui, and Jalen Hood, Schifino, and Wood, right? So now you're like 4 guys gone, just Donovan Mitchell comes back, and I'm making that up, and I haven't looked at the exact math, but let's say that happens. So you've gone down 4, you've added 1, so now you have 3 open spots, and let's say they're worried about certain aprons or the second apron or whatever. At that point, you need to just understand that they have to get to 14 players no matter what to start the season or 2 weeks in. And even if you sign a rookie, the way that the taxes work and the aprons work, you have to count it at the 2-year vet min, which this next season is about 2.1. So a rookie that they draft 1.1 or 1.2, like Bronny or 55, whoever they get, or if it's not a rookie, you're signing some random minimum free agent, even if it was Chris Paul or somebody or some big guy or whoever, doesn't matter. It's 2.1 million. Just have to slot that in up to 14. That's a mistake that some people will make who kind of know the rules and kind of know the numbers, kind of know the cap, and they say, oh, it works. I'm like, yeah, but they're like 9 players or 10 players. You still need 3 more players. You got a hard cap. You got to be able to get to 14. So slot that in. So a lot of little details. I that's kind of what I'm pretty decent at, is tracking all these little details. Like, I don't know.
Great at it. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's just about knowing what to look for and being organized. And some teams are better at manipulating it. Lakers are at times good and at times not so good. So they have a very spotty track record of execution. So we'll have to see how they function. But yeah, I do think, for the Laker fans who are tuning in because they want to hear hopeful things, all right, like they're not here to just hear how their team is, screwed or something like that. They're certainly not screwed. Like you still have LeBron and AD and Austin, and then D'Lo, Rui are very talented players. They have some good role players. They have to make a good hire as a coach to make sure that it's well run. I would argue that Darvin was very good at some things and probably not great at others. And that's why he no longer has a job, right or wrong. But they do have the flexibility to go after a big name. Whether they should or not, shouldn't is very subjective. If you're not like, there are some fans I've noticed who are like, they love to move on from LeBron. Time to move on. Lakers don't seem to agree with that. So as a journalist, my job is not to, come up with what they should do. It's more of like, this is what they're planning on doing. Within that, this is how they can function. So it seems like the Lakers are committed to this path. So, but I do think, if you love Donovan Mitchell and if he does demand a trade, and by the way, if he doesn't demand a trade, there's a reasonable chance they trade Darius Garland. And so, like, he's better at some things than I was like, oh, he's much slighter than D'Lo. And I looked at it and he actually, I think he weighs like 5 more pounds than Russell. Like, it's within 5 pounds. And given that D'Angelo has shrunk over the years, not that he shrunk, but the measurement, there's not a huge height difference. And so the one thing that I'll say, if Garland became available, is that first of all, the track record in the playoffs is just shorter. We don't have as much data. But the one thing that stands out is that he's been pretty consistent from regular season to playoff in terms of production. This year, his 3-point shooting was lower, but not like D'Angelo lower. Like D'Angelo's regular season efficiency from 3 it falls off a cliff. And he was better this year, but it was still not good. So you could look at Garland and say, he didn't have a great postseason, but then Donovan Mitchell also had the ball almost the entire time, and Garland wasn't playing his game. You say, well, same thing's going to happen with LeBron, maybe. But I do think, and also Garland, I think, is clutch too. So something to think about. And then there's one more last thing on the Cavs. How willing is the owner of the team to help LeBron maybe win another title and help the Lakers, who, this is the same guy who, wrote a letter back in the day around, what was the Chris Paul times, to probably took credit for Chris Paul not coming a Laker. He's not why Chris Paul wasn't a Laker. I would say he had, if he wants credit above 0, I'll give it to him, but it's in the 1 or 2% influence on that, maybe 5 if you want to be generous. 95% of why Chris Paul wasn't a Laker had to do with other things, and we could talk about that some other time. But is that the guy who's trading Donovan Mitchell, who, if he demands out and says, I'm leaving, and now you have hurt feelings, and they give him a list of 4 teams he wants to go to, and now we got to trade him to that? Yeah. I'm not saying that the Cavs are going to trade with the Lakers. I think there's an argument to be made that they don't. And they may take a similar deal that's not bad, but maybe arguably not as good as what the Lakers would offer, just not to help LeBron. That's possible. So then you're looking at Trae.
I believe that letter was also in Comic Sans font. If I'm
it wasn't a Comic Sans font, which it's better. It makes the story better that it took something that was already great and it just gave it that little extra. So yeah. Comic Sans. Yeah.
I will say though, one interesting nugget within all this is that LeBron did attend that Cavs game, and apparently he was a guest of Dan Gilbert. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like the relationship might be a little better than it once was. Winning a title in 2016 and coming back to Cleveland in 2014 certainly helped. Now there's a difference between, you're the best player in franchise history, come sit courtside and support the team, versus we're going to trade you our best player. That there's a bit of a gap there, but it is worth noting that it seems like it's a little better than it once was, for sure.
So from a point of view, let's say that he could go to New York. I don't know that New York has a lot outside of some picks, and Bogdanovich and maybe Randall, who doesn't really fit. Maybe they also trade trade Allen, and do they think Mobley and Julius Randle is the right combination with Garland? I don't know. It's iffy. And then the Nets don't really have much in terms of players, actual players who can help, unless you love Cam Thomas. He's very polarizing. Cam Johnson's a little bit older, barely ever healthy. They're not trading Bridges to get Donovan. Otherwise, they're not trading for Donovan. And then Miami's sort of the wild card. I think there's a case, but do they want Hero? Right? Like there's an argument that they don't, and they just don't want Hero, or maybe they like Hero and Miami's the team. If those are, Houston can make an offer. If they're offering Jalen Green, that's probably the best offer that the Cavs can get. And Donovan probably doesn't even have Houston on their team, and their owner's the kind of owner who would probably be like, he'll love Houston and do it anyway. But let's say none of that happens. Lakers, if they're offering, say, Rui, D'Lo, these picks, you can argue it. Now, probably hinges on Austin at that point, but do they have leverage? The Cavs might not have leverage. And but when it comes to Garland, like, yeah, I mean, that might be different. I haven't run the market to see who would go after Garland. So I've spent more time on Donovan, but that's something I'll be looking at. But I do think that, like, in this industry, you have to make the best decision for you as a team. But people are petty and make stupid decisions all the time that, like, aren't what's best for you. So I can't tell a team make a good decision. Like, Laker fans clamor for Alex Caruso, right? Like, for years, they're like, oh, the Bulls go to they should have gotten Drummond and Caruso. I'm like, go look at, like, the transaction logs of, like, Lakers Chicago. Like, they don't make trades together. The last one was, like, during the when the Lakers were rebuilding and were terrible, and they took the Bulls dumped like an older point guard, a Spanish point guard on them, and I forget which one it was. It was whatever. Like it was a marriage of convenience that helped the Bulls. I think their owner doesn't want LeBron infringing upon, like, Michael's legacy. So like that I get. I don't
Also,
get,
the Bulls just don't trade. I mean, that's
they're
too.
I mean, they have some trades. Obviously, they made a trade with Orlando and, like, got Vooch and stuff. But, like, yeah, they're not a big trading team. They're a conservative team in how they operate. But, like, there's no, like, the intel is that, like, they're just not going to help LeBron. I do think you can argue that, like, the Cavs may get over some of these hurt feelings about him. Like, they got him the only championship he ever got. And you could argue the greater that LeBron's legacy, not that it needs to be any greater, but, like, if he won more, does that hurt the Cavs? No. I mean, so you can argue. I'm more willing to suspend my disbelief for the Cavs trading to the Lakers than the Bulls. That's just so, not that, Lakers should be going after Zach LaVine or anything like that, because his knees are shot, and I like him as a player. I went to UCLA, but, like, yeah, don't go after hurt players. That's good rule of thumb.
So
we
last one,
yes.
Yeah, I think we basically hit on everything. The only thing I was curious about was with Cam Reddish and Jackson Hayes, is there a material difference in terms of if they both declined or opted out, then I guess that's about maybe like 1.2, 1.3 million in wiggle room.
Jackson Hayes is 2.5. Cam Reddish is 2.5. They're 2.46.
They're both 2.5. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
call it 2.5.
I thought Jackson was 3 for some reason, but okay.
Well, no, it's Wood. Wood's the big one. If someone were to opt out, it would be Wood. He didn't opt out. He was the first to opt in. That said,
always a great sign.
I do think that he's very tradable as a filler. And you can say, who's going to want him as a player? It doesn't matter. Players are traded for in the offseason and then cut all the time, or stick around and are traded at the deadline. So it doesn't matter if the team likes him or had him before and got rid of him. He's a number at this point. If the Lakers don't want to keep him, if they want to keep him, fine. But if they don't, he's the obvious guy. Like, Hayes was part of the rotation. There are things he does that are athletic that I can argue fit better than Wood, who is, in my opinion, a little bit of a ball stopper on offense and doesn't bring enough on offense, let alone defense, to justify it. That's my opinion. Obviously,
I agree.
These things are subjective. Hayes, at least, like, Hayes knows his role, plays within his role. He's not gonna. He's limited in what he can bring in terms of, like. But I actually kind of like him. Cam, he's fine. Like, I don't know anybody who in the NBA who's with a team who really loves Cam Reddish. He's just sort of known as an underperformer. He did have a good stretch for a few games at some point.
I was going to say it was like a 2-week stretch in
right?
November.
Yeah. Well, that's my rule of thumb. that anybody could play well. Anybody in the NBA can play out of their mind for 2 weeks. We had Cam for 3 or 4 games where it was like, yeah, he hit a game winner, or not a game winner, a game sealer. Let's not get crazy here. A game they were up.
The legend.
Yes, he hit a 3 that made sure they didn't, and that's important. That mattered. Right?
No, it was a big in-season tournament, and it was the game in Phoenix.
Yes, and he does defend well in theory. Like, he's not a bad defender. If he was I don't know, if he had a little more drive to be great, I think he could be great. I can't speak for him. Maybe he has that drive and it just, for whatever reason, hasn't been realized. I haven't seen the drive, or at least it hasn't been visible from my point of view, that he's incredible talent that hasn't popped, and he's never really popped other than as potential. So but yeah, they could easily trade him. Again, you can only aggregate one of those players. If you're getting like a big name, you can only include one. That's a rule change during the offseason. And I think Wood is the guy because he's the most money. But they could easily trade any of these guys. You want to trade them to some team that has cap room. Trade them to Charlotte. Give them some cash. That's theoretically possible. You might have to give a second to get out of one of these guys. Lakers don't have a ton of seconds, but they have some. If they need to, they can certainly get that done. I expect him to opt in, but we'll see. And I expect Jackson to opt in. If they opt out, they get a slightly uptick in flexibility. And also Maxwell Lewis, like, if they traded him, you have to replace him, and you're probably replacing him with a minimum guy, and a minimum guy takes up, as we said, like over $2 million, and Maxwell Lewis is about 1.9. Since he was a draft pick, they're better off keeping him. And for the finance, like, if their money gets really tight, you're better off keeping Maxwell Lewis. You're better off keeping 55, and spending that money in whatever, like whoever you keep, whether it's the mid-level, Taurean Prince, Christie, whatever. But again, it all hinges on what D'Lo does, and of course LeBron. If LeBron walks, you'll have me back on if LeBron walks, and we'll run through the possibilities.
We'll go through the limited cap space that they could potentially
they would have some flexibility. I'd be like, maybe hell, I mean, if D'Lo and LeBron opt out now, it's like, now I'd have a whole different set of things to start running, but I'm not going to go there until we have that intel. So
yeah, well, we'll bring you on if that ends up happening. But Eric, you were very generous with your time. I really appreciate it. I know our viewers and listeners are really going to appreciate this deep dive. This is like information that I haven't seen elsewhere, and I know you've touched on this in your writing for Bleacher Report, but I think this is the most comprehensive breakdown of the Lakers cap situation out right now. So I really appreciate it. Where can people find and read your work, and where can people work with you as we see behind you the sports business classroom? Where can people learn if they have interest in the cap and getting more involved in the NBA?
Sure. Well, I write for Bleacher Report. I cover the NBA. I also, being in LA, I cover a bunch of Lakers and a little bit of Clippers as well. So you can find me at Bleacher Report, or just on Twitter /X at Eric Pincus, EricPincus. And I'm generally happy to answer questions. So if you hit me up on Twitter or whatever, I try to answer them, unless if we're in a busy part of the news cycle where I wrote an article and I've got flooded with people arguing with me tagged, then I might miss it. There are times where there's nothing going on. You ask me a question, I'll answer. And then there's times where I wouldn't find your question if I tried. That said, I work for Sports Business Classroom. We have an immersive program in Las Vegas at Summer League in July to help students get into the industry, be it through scouting, video, analytics, media, broadcast, or through the salary cap. And that may be with a team. Maybe that's with an agent, working on the agent side, maybe with a network, maybe with a shoe company, or with the league itself, or the G League, or the WNBA, or whatever. There are opportunities in basketball to do what you love to do. And we have a great track record of helping students, from Amber Nichols, who's the GM of the Capital City Go-Go, to Lindsay Harding took our program, and she's like G League Coach of the Year. Rod Strickland, by the way, took our class, which was like super cool. And like former Knicks legendary point guard, but like he took it with all our students. He was just like awesome, and then he moved on to some other stuff. He's coaching in college right now or something like that. But the main thing is that I can help you learn about the program. We only have about 10-ish spots left, maybe a dozen. I haven't checked the Monday applicants, but we're running out of space. We have about 120 that we're gonna bring in. We're already over. We're right around 110. So it's not the cheapest program, but it's also an investment in yourself and your career. But we're we find that no one has ever taken our program and been like, that wasn't money well spent. And I also build a relationship with my students. They work for me doing scouting reports. That's how I build out a big board. We had 16 of the first 17 players in the last draft, not in order, but correct. We didn't have Cam Whitmore falling that far, but no one else. We had him, we dropped him.
No one really did.
Yeah, we didn't. But again, I don't even watch college, and we do such a good job. And so we really get to know our students and really support them and really try to help them. So look, if you're interested in getting into basketball as a career, hit me up on Twitter at Eric Pincus, or just go to sportsbusinessclassroom.com and ask questions. Reach out to me, and I can at least talk to you. I've actually got a potential student, someone just reached out like, hey, I want to talk about my career opportunities, and I'm happy to have those conversations. Even if you don't take the program, I'm happy to have a 10-15 minute conversation and just sort of give some perspective. And that's about it. I have fun doing what I do. And if you're if you're an agent and you're looking, or you want to be an agent, you need help passing the test, I help on that front. I help tutor. So I tutored about 30 students this last exam to get through. One of them was Trevor Booker, former player. I helped Mamute pass last year, Luke Mamute, and the year before that, former Laker Ramon Sessions. I helped him pass the exam, which was cool. He's a great dude. So yeah. Anyway, those are all my. I guess those are my plugs, so to speak. So, but no, I do appreciate what you do as far as the work you do on the Athletic, and I'm happy to see you succeed. So keep at it. Whatever I can do to help you.
I appreciate it, man. This was
Yes,
this was great, and definitely hit Eric up on that if you have any interest in pursuing a career in the NBA. I think that's a golden opportunity to get your foot in the door and learn from people who've been doing it for decades. So be sure to apply and hit him up. But that will do it for today's episode. I will be back later in the week, barring something crazy happening. You never know with the Lakers. It feels like every day there is something happening, but most likely we'll be back on Thursday or Friday with episode 25. I will talk to you then.